Médecins Sans Frontières hospital has been leveled by airstrikes, this time in Yemen.
7 people died and at least 8 staff were missing after a missile struck a hospital in the town of Marat al-Numan in Idlib province.
It is unacceptable that the bombing of hospital and the killing of staff and patient can be dismissed as collateral damage or brushed aside as a mistake. As doctor, we are fighting back for the sake of patient. Today, we say enough. Even war has rules.
Médecins Sans Frontières, also known as MSF or Doctors Without Borders, delivers impartial medical care in conflict and war zones around the world.
Providing impartial medical care is at the heart of the principles that drive MSF teams on the ground. It's also at the core of the Hippocratic Oath that doctors and nurses take, which is to treat anyone regardless of what side they're on, even if they were the enemy or they're combatants.
In this moment, the MSF, is alone.
But with shocking regularity, medical facilities, staff, and the patients they treat have become the direct targets of war.
5 شهداء وأكثر من 30 جريح جلهم الآن تحت هذه الأنقاض بعد استهداف الطيران الروسي لمشفى أطباء بلا حدود حقق إصابة مباشرة داخل هذه المشفى أدت إلى تدميرها بشكل كامل.
Some accuse Russia of hitting 6 hospitals in Syria. Others accuse it of hitting just 1. But no one could independently verify the claims.
We are not naive. We know it's incredibly dangerous work. Our staff take risks. They understand those risks. But those risks shouldn't be including the hospitals they're working in being targeted and bombed. Nor should they be attacked for doing their work, which is providing medical care to people based on no other consideration other than their medical status.
Since the Syrian conflict began, there have been countless hospitals bombed or shelled. More than 67 of them were supported by MSF. In Yemen, over the course of 3 months, 3 MSF medical structures were either partially or completely destroyed.
We do take precautions to try and limit the risks for both our teams and also our patients in our medical facilities. This has included everything from giving GPS coordinates to different sides of the conflict, but we also know that hasn't worked in many of the conflicts because many of the combatants have directly targeted medical care, either criminalizing it or targeting it by bombing healthcare facilities.
When we attack medical facilities and it becomes dysfunctional, you are depriving of the lifeline, the medical lifeline for the general population.
The most deadly attack on an MSF hospital was in October 2015. 105 patients were being treated in the trauma center, some of them undergoing surgery. The U.S. gunship fired for about an hour, killing 42 people, including 24 patients, 14 hospital staff, and 4 caretakers.
We were offering high-level trauma care to the whole civilian population in northeastern Afghanistan. It was offering care to more than 1 million people. Everybody knew our address.
8 months after the attack, the U.S. Department of Defense announced the conclusions of its own self-investigations.
The investigation determined that all members of both the ground force and the AC-130 aircrew were unaware that the aircraft was firing on a medical facility throughout the engagement. The investigation ultimately concluded that this tragic incident was caused by a combination of human errors compounded by process and equipment failures.
صحیح مسئله دلیل نگی ولی معذرت وارشته اشتباه معذرت نگی یا بام 2 بام 3 بام 213 بام دیف اچ غیر اغنا فایرینگ لیزر فایر کرده که میوی مواد جو جنایت جنگی جنایت باید جنگ استفاده می‌کنه استفاده کیمیایی مواد هم استفاده بگواله.
We provided the GPS coordinates repeatedly to civilian and military leadership, both in Washington and Kabul. I find it very difficult to believe that people were not aware of the intent and the purpose of this facility, and we'll continue to demand for an independent inquiry into this attack.
Well, for us, what is important, it's our biggest loss of staff and patient in one attack. And we need to understand, because if we don't understand, it means that somehow what we thought was the rule of working in war zone, meaning that they were a protected space in terms of medical space, is not applicable anymore. And this is what we call the Geneva Convention.
In 1949, the Geneva Conventions established the rules of international and armed conflict. Medical facilities must be protected in order to minimize casualties in times of war. 59 countries signed the declaration.
I'm sending team at the front line, taking risk for themselves, but as well, by opening a center, I am putting at risk thousands of patients. And I don't want our hospital to become bait for patients. So how are we going to deal with that?
Yes, Nida. Are you ready? Yes, we are going out. We will be the first car. Over.
Today, we really see a situation where there is no accountability for these attacks on healthcare. We see countless places, whether it be Yemen, Sudan, Syria, where there are no serious, impartial, or independent investigations of these incidents. And that exposes a real vacuum that exists today in the international humanitarian system and in the political system.
Denying people access to essential health care.
In May 2016, the United Nations Security Council met to address the ongoing security crisis of medical care in conflict zones.
And protect the medical personnel.
You are charged with protecting peace and security. Yet, 4 of the 5 permanent members of this council have, to varying degrees, been associated with coalition responsible for attacks on health structure over the last year. Stop these attacks.
It really strikes at the core of our humanity. At the end of the day, everyone should be concerned. There are conflicts raging across many different countries today. And we see, perhaps more than any other time, how difficult it is to reach those people. And that's why we need to push back and ensure that governments, armed groups, non-state groups take these responsibilities seriously and make sure that there is a space for humanity in armed conflict.
In a unanimous vote, the Security Council supported a resolution condemning attacks and threats against the wounded and sick, medical and humanitarian personnel, as well as against hospitals and other medical facilities.
Today's words will only be meaningful if they are put into practice. The Security Council members must live up to their extraordinary responsibility and set an example for all states. This resolution must save lives.
Medical humanitarian organizations and people living in conflict zones look to this resolution to protect impartial health care and to support the ethical obligations of healthcare workers to treat all sick and wounded without discrimination.
It is only the beginning, though. It's not enough solely to keep our patients and staff safe in hospitals. The targeting of civilians in conflict is egregious, but at a minimum, the gates of our hospitals, that is the last line of defense that we're trying to hold up.